Hello! In this video I would like to show you how I made this whimsical tiny house in the forest. First off, I'm of course removing the labels, and I removed that little sign that was in the front that I didn't want to have there. I found this wooden little house quite cheaply in a craft store, and the rest of the materials I'm going to be using on this project are mostly recycled things. And as you can see, I'm using some packaging material, takeaway box, and I used just a regular aluminium foil ball to give the foam some texture before I cut it up in small pieces. I'm just cutting out strips and squares to make bricks for the little house. I measured and I figured out what would be the best size for the individual bricks, and I went ahead and started sticking on the little bricks one by one, making sure that I cut them in a way that complements the already existing shape. That slanting roof and curved roof was quite an interesting and lovely aspect of this little blank, and that's what made me buy it in the first place. After all the bricks have been stuck on and they dried, I actually hit it with the heat gun a little bit to curve those edges and also firm up the foam itself. Here I am just painting it red with a nice brick red, because I do want the bricks to have that traditional red color. Now I'm tackling the roof. I'm using some scrap foam I had left over from another project, but this is really basically the same material as what I was using from the takeaway box. Maybe just a tiny bit firmer. I am taking my time and using like a pokey tool to draw some lines and texture the roof tiles, or shingles rather. And I'm also using a sharp knife to cut out little chunks so that there's a little bit more variation. I'm attaching them with hot glue because I just didn't have patience for the white glue to dry, and actually the hot glue is helping warm up the foam itself, and it makes it a little bit easier for me to press it into the shape of the roof, because these were all straight pieces. I actually used the heat gun on the shingles as well, and it made them look a lot better than my straight cuts from before. Now here I am forming a paste from tile grout, a little bit of matte medium, and some acrylic paint. And I'm using it just like you would use tile grout to fill in the spaces between the bricks. So when this is dry, I am using this shellac ink with a little bit of acrylic paint to tint that tile grout and also to seal it in. This will make it very permanent, and if I use other colors or other mediums or glues, it won't start disintegrating and flaking. The shellac ink is one of my favorite ways to seal things that I don't mind being a little bit glossy. I'm just using like a medium brown to paint that window frame and the door, and also the same brown to give the roof a first coat of color. Now it's not going to stay this color, but as it's still raw foam in a lot of the places, it just needs a layer of paint to be primed with. And also using the same brown, I think it gives a nice undertone of matching color. So here I am using kind of a golden yellow to go over the brown on the roof. And this is not quite dry brushing. I am actually working it into most of the nooks and crannies. I do want to color and tint the whole surface. And here I am using a different kind of chocolate brown with more of that shellac ink to seal in and tint the roof all over, even here at the front part. And it works as a wash, and it gives that depth of color. And finally, I am using a very nice dove gray to dry brush all over the roof. Now I'm turning my attention to the base. I'm just using a sturdy piece of cardboard, and I'm creating this little platform with some edges as like a few steps in front of the house. And I'm using this core of a spent tape. My vision is to make it into a well in the front yard of this tiny house. I'm using that leftover tile grout mixture to make that dirt and ground texture on the cardboard. After the tile grout mixture has dried on that core of tape, I'm using my pokey tool to carve in little grooves to make stonework. But as I'm trying it on, it's not looking quite right. I feel like it's too thin, so I'm just going to cut out a ring of cardboard to attach it to the top of that circle to make the rim of the well wider. Quickly removing that giant doorknob that's going to be replaced. Onto painting the base. I'm using a brown for the steps and a black for everywhere that's ground, as well as the little well, and then an earth tone over the black and the stonework of the well, and a dark wash to seep into the cracks, and a light gray on the stonework. I cut out a piece of cardboard that I previously colored blue, mottled blue, as the bottom of the fountain to mimic some water. Also, I'm making a small planter to add to the front yard, and I just used a small plastic part that I had in my stash and just attaching some foliage inside. Now I'm finally attaching the house to the base, and I'm adding another design element, this little metal owl. I just like the visual triangle that it creates with the window and the door. Now I'm starting to work on the foliage. I'm first adding these 3 little bushes, and I am also going to start using with some basing materials. So in these little bags, in one of them I have small rocks, in the other one I have some fine granite, and the third one is just some construction sand. And I am using these to add debris inside of the shallow well, and I'm using it as grounding material all around the house in this terrain piece. I'm just using PVA glue and layering them, first the chunkier bits, then going to the granite, and then going to the sand. Just filling in the gaps, working it in, rinse and repeat until I am pleased with the outcome. I cut apart a scenery tree here to add a little bit more foliage, and I've made a similar tinted shellac ink mixture to seal in all the ground cover and also to tint it a little bit more brownish. I wasn't very happy with how the bushes looked so wiry, so I decided to add some dark green foliage on top, and that made them come alive a lot better. And here I am attaching the well to the base and using those cut off bits of tree to attach them here and there to make it look a lot more organic and to feel like this is a place where plants can grow quite wild, and although the people who live there care for their environment, they are not very fastidious about trimming things. Pulling out some grass tops from my collection. Possibly these are the most expensive materials that I've used on this project, but these grass tufts can be made at home, and there are many people here on YouTube who have made tutorials on how to make them. So I just pulled out a few and I am cutting some of them up, sticking them in nooks and crannies, filling in empty spaces, and I'm just going with the flow and adding what feels right to me. I'm going from bigger ones to smaller and smaller until I get to these little teeny tiny 2mm grass tufts, and they worked really well on this scale as well. After that, I pulled out a bunch of dried green moss, and I'm using it to make this plant that has crawled up and grown right over the roof of this tiny house. Just picking out little bits that are going to fit the shape the best. As a final touch, I'm applying some PVA glue to the roof and the back of the tiny house, and scattering on this dark green scenery powder, just to make it like moss is growing all over the place. It just rounds out the aesthetic of this tiny little house, makes it just that tiny bit more whimsical. I have included some photos of the finished piece from all the angles and some close-ups. I'm really happy with the outcome, and making this was delightful. I hope you enjoyed seeing the process of creating this, and thank you for watching this video. Hope you have a nice day.